Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Today, we're looking back at my first game in the local Mordheim campaign. The noble, brave warriors of the Blue Company marched forth into the wrecked and smashed up streets, there to find in their way a bunch of Tileans, ready to make their life as difficult as possible. So what was I up against? I was up against a force that I had actually played against in one of my test games, wielded by one of my regular opponents in all things old world, and I knew just from that it would be a difficult encounter. So what had he taken in his list? Well, the force was led by a captain armed with a crossbow and a sword. There were two champions, one with crossbow, light armour, helmet and sword, and the other armed just with a crossbow and sword. The heroes were rounded out by two young bloods equipped with sword, buckler and dagger. As for henchmen, there were three marksmen, all of which armed with a crossbow. Now, the Tilean thing for this warband is that when using missile weapons, particularly crossbows, I think it is, they get a +1 to hit. So ballistic skill 3 effectively becomes ballistic skill 4. So you've got a weapon that's normally hitting on a 3 before any modifiers, that's hitting at strength 4. Now this being old school Warhammer rules, strength 4 also has the impact of reducing armor saves by 1. So if you hit someone that's just armed with light armor or just equipped with a shield, then a crossbow bolt will go straight through that without breaking sweat. And the opponent will get wounded if you're able to meet the test to cause a wound. So no armor save at all. We were playing Weird Stone Hunt and rolled up 3 bits of Weird Stone for us to compete over. Maybe a little bit on the low side, a bit unfortunate. So my opponent had only really 2 models that he could use with any sense of mobility, and those are the 2 Youngbloods. In this game, the terrain did favour him slightly in the race towards the centre, where all the Weirdstone was, which meant he was able to grab it fairly effectively. And we'll get a bit of a round by round going on in just a second. But going into the game, I knew I had to move forward quickly. I had to move forward also, however, carefully. Because, quite frankly, if I wasn't careful, I'd be walking into a shooting alley with a whole load of very accurate crossbow bolts that, at strength 4 compared to my regular guy's toughness of 3, meant I would probably expect to take a lot of casualties very quickly. So how did the game pan out? Well, I got to go first and spent my first turn pushing forward. My opponent had deployed right on the back of the board, meaning I couldn't get my bows into range. In his turn 1, he rushed forward and was able to grab a piece of Weirdstone. A shot was fired at my captain, turned out to be out of range even for the 30 inches of the crossbow. Not all of his guys were out of range, however, and the Tilean captain took a shot at one of my marksmen. The henchman collapsed to the ground, out of action in the first successful shot of the game. Turn 2 saw my captain grabbing a piece of Weirdstone and moving into cover, while the rest of my forces again continued their general push forward, trying to get in range with the marksman and also trying to get to a position where I could threaten my opponent without getting turned into a pincushion. When it came to the Tileans, a second Youngblood was able to dive in through and pick up a piece of Weirdstone. The original Youngblood that had picked some up already, beating a steady retreat. In the ensuing shooting phase, one of my champions was knocked down, but overall the firepower was broadly ineffective, my guys being able to hug the terrain pretty closely. Turn 3 largely saw more of the same. Rolf, one of my heroes and my swordsmen were making a broad flanking action, nipping through the ruined buildings, trying to stay out of harm's way. My captain, with the precious piece of weirdstone, hunkered down from line of sight, whilst I relatively ineffectively continued my push up the centre of the board to try and get to grips with the fast retreating Youngbloods. Moving into turn 4, again, that cagey push continued. Rolf and the swordsman were starting to get into a reasonable position to threaten the Tilean flank. The Tileans responded with a little bit of repositioning, but overall, the incoming firepower suddenly went up a notch in its accuracy. The Tilean captain managed a second out of action, this time taking down the swordsman on the flanking route, and Franz, my Youngblood, was also taken out by one of the henchman groups. I was now down to bottle tests. My forces nowhere really in a position to get to the Youngbloods, who were racing back to the safety of the crossbow line, or indeed get into a position where I could charge the crossbowmen who were in the upper reaches of various buildings. At this point, discretion very much came the better part of valour, and my force slinked back into the shadows, taking one piece of weirdstone with them and surrendering the table to the Tileans. In the post-game, I didn't really get a lot, as you'd expect from a pretty abysmal effort from my guys to really do much. In the post-game searches, I did come across a little bit more weirdstone, just a single shard, also finding a shop which revealed 3 coins. I decided to sell the bows that my marksmen were armed with, and with the shards of weirdstone, this gave me enough cash in order to purchase 3 crossbows for my marksmen, so hopefully really uplifting their potential firepower. Franz, my Youngblood that was taken out of action, sadly is going to be missing the next game with a leg injury. Fortunately, the archer and the swordsman, the 2 henchmen that were hit, came out absolutely fine. There were no skills, no increases to stats to talk about here, so it will be onwards to the next matchup. This was always going to be a tough one, having to move forward into effectively a gun line of pretty accurate shots. That's not really going to be fun for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to struggle into that. However, at the moment, there are still just those 2 models, I think, on the Tilean warband that are really able to move effectively. So when we get further down the campaign and different scenarios open up, if the Tilean force is forced to be more mobile, then they are going to be a little bit more vulnerable, especially if they start coming up against stuff with higher toughness, for example, or just stuff that can cover the ground a bit quicker than a regular human. They'll certainly ask a few more questions. But for the Blue Company, it is very much a case of going back and licking their wounds. Let's hope the next game brings more success and a few narrative points that we can bring out the personality of this particular warband. I hope you've enjoyed this run through of my first game. It is a lot of fun, Mordheim. It's something I am enjoying, despite the fact this game was predictably a little bit of a damp squib, but that's just the way this sort of matchup goes, unfortunately. Really looking forward to the next one. Last thing for me to say is thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.